Hello, I'm Doug Guthrie, professor of global leadership at the Thunderbird School of Global Management and co-founder and chairman of On Global Leadership. We like to present these weekly takes on what's happening with China in the news. So this is the week ending November 16th, 2024, China in the news. On Global Leadership, we strive to help the world understand China, U.S.-China relations, the international foreign policy issues that are central. And we also bring our audiences significant experience in leadership development. So in addition to our research and thought leadership in these areas, we also offer advisory work and executive coaching as they relate to important areas. We also have a new course that we're experimenting with called U.S.-China Relations and Technology, Apple in China, TikTok in the U.S., and TSMC in Phoenix. So come check us out. So China in the news. So it's been an important period with respect to China and U.S.-China relations. The election of President Trump raises many important issues for U.S.-China relations and China's role in the region and the world. For myself, as someone who's spent his entire professional career writing, teaching, advising, coaching about strong, positive U.S.-China relations, I have to admit, initially devastated by the outcome. But a day or two of funk, and then I realized I needed to pull myself together because I needed to teach, advise, coach, and present a generative way of how we can think about how to continue to build relations with the world's second largest economy. So I quickly found my voice again, and I locked into the idea that Trump and Vance are business people. Tariffs are taxes on the American consumers, plain and simple. And anybody who tells you different is lying. It's the companies that pay the tax, not China. And those costs are always passed on to consumers. And so, this idea of 60% tariffs, I started to think like, this is ridiculous. Like companies like Tesla and Apple and Walmart, they're going to pass those costs on to the consumers. But if China decides to make life difficult for these companies, it'll become really hard. And so I just think that 60% tariffs are just rhetoric. And, I just think it's a little crazy. But this week, the announcements of appointments of China hawks like Marco Rubio and Matt Waltz, it does cast a darker shadow again, to be sure. So our first news item, Biden and Xi are meeting at the APEC Summit. And, this is their third APEC Summit meeting. This one is in Lima in Peru. It's this weekend. And at OGL, we remember a year ago when it seemed like a really exciting, auspicious time when President Xi got on a plane and flew to San Francisco for the APEC Summit and met with President Biden. And it just seemed great. It seemed like the harbinger of positive movements. This year feels much different. The meeting will surely be cordial, but the shadow in the room will be the looming Trump presidency. So the second news item, trade wars. The trade wars continue. Donald Trump started talking with bluster about this in 2016. He put in about 300 billion in tariffs in 2018. Those tariffs have largely stayed in place. There were some additional tariffs of about 18 billion put in by President Biden, and those ones very much focused on electric vehicles and electric vehicle batteries and those kinds of issues. As an aside, we've written and talked about this before. The general tariffs, I think, are silly because the costs are just passed on to consumers. Specific tariffs that can force higher prices in companies like BYD and then bring American consumers to think about other options like Tesla, and actually then create jobs because Tesla has manufacturing production sites in the United States. Those are smart tariffs, right? So there is a way that tariffs work. It's just general tariffs are ridiculous. So third news item, protecting Taiwan. This is a big issue, and it continues to be a big issue. We're seeing heightened military activity. In the succession of Taiwanese presidents, I was saying to one of my classes the other day, I think Lee Teng-hui is sort of the hero here. Like Lee Teng-hui took the country away from being, a place of martial law under Chiang Kai-shek and his son, and then really, opened the door for a democratic system, right? And that democratic system led to Chen Shui-bian getting elected, and Chen Shui-bian was a little scarier on the issue of Taiwan independence, and the Democratic Progressive Party sort of pushed that along. But I think in the last two presidents, Ma Ying-jeou and Tsai Ing-wen, we've had much more moderate people who realized that this negotiation has to happen, and sort of saber rattling around Taiwan independence wasn't going to be smart. President Lai Ching-te is a wild card. I think it's a stronger position that he's taking, and at OGL we're concerned, and so we really believe that we all need to be careful, and smart people need to be in the room negotiating with all sides. Our fourth news item, TikTok. In April of 2024, President Biden signed into law a law which was passed by Congress mandating that the Chinese innovation giant ByteDance, which owns TikTok, they must sell TikTok, or the widely popular app would face a ban in the United States. Now, the argument here is that ByteDance and by extension TikTok are agents of the Chinese government, and so they're feeding all of this data about U.S. consumers and U.S. citizens to the Chinese government. And then there's an additional argument that that the Chinese government is influencing the algorithms so that TikTok can be feeding information to certain groups of people that make them have more negative views of the U.S. government and such. Our own view is that, first of all, ByteDance is a privately held company, and it's about 60% controlled by foreign investment sources. And the idea that ByteDance, we have no empirical evidence that they're feeding that data to the Chinese government, but the idea that they are, and we know this from some of our inside research with the company, is just ridiculous. And so we have our own concerns with how TikTok handled its negotiations. Just dealing with lobbying firms in Washington is probably not the right approach, but taking a much more proactive stance in teaching about how social media works and what things TikTok is trying to do with its algorithms, et cetera, probably would have been better. The deadline for the sale is January 19th, one day before the Trump inauguration. And so it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out, and we continue to watch. Our final news item is we just noticed that in the news, I'm based in Phoenix, and so I often talk about this being the most important moment in U.S.-China relations in the last 30 years. And we have issues about Apple in China and Tesla in China and Walmart in China and others. But we also have TSMC in Phoenix. And so the building of 3 new fab sites in the Arizona area and the creation of a manufacturing supply chain for arguably one of the most important products, the semiconductor industry, chips, is crucial. It's a really, really interesting and fascinating time. The interesting news that just came out is that TSMC employees in Arizona are suing the company for unfair labor practices and sort of a misunderstanding of how to deal with American laborers. This will be interesting to see how it plays out. TSMC, I think, really needs help, and we need help in cross-cultural leadership, and we need to help the company in really thinking through. We think it's a very important economic development moment for Phoenix and an important one for this industry. But we need to continue to talk to people about leadership and cross-cultural management. And these, by the way, are things that both Thunderbird School of Global Management and On Global Leadership emphasize and claim expertise in. So anyway, that's our news for the week ending November 16th, 2024. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.